Hello everyone. I welcome you all to this newspaper analysis initiative. We will move on to the first article for the day. See, regarding these two articles, the TN governor refuses to read customary address in assembly and governor altered policy address, says Kerala chief minister. See, when you look into these two articles, you must be aware of Article 176 of the Constitution, which deals with the customary address of the governor to the state legislature. See, Article 176 says that at the commencement of the first session after each general election to the Legislative Assembly and at the commencement of the first session of each year, the governor shall address the Legislative Assembly. So, this is you should be knowing, that is Article 176. Apart from that, these two examples can be effectively used to substantiate arguments in GS2 polity mains answer. The next article, from flexible to fearful, women gig workers hemmed in by new rules. This article talks about women working in the gig economy, especially on platforms like Urban Company. And these are jobs like beauty services, spa, massage, cleaning, and home services. Earlier, these jobs were advertised as flexible. Women were told that they could choose their working hours and balance work with family. But now, many women say this flexibility is slowly disappearing. Now, what has changed? Earlier, workers could switch the app on and off. They could decide when to work. This helped women manage children, home, and work. Now, the company has introduced fixed peak hours. These are from 9 to 11 a.m. and 4 to 8 p.m. During these hours, workers cannot turn off the app. If they do, they are punished. This creates a big problem for women. For example, some women now have to choose between taking work calls or dropping their children to school. And there is a constant monitoring. Women workers say they feel constantly watched. If they cancel more than 3 jobs in a month, their IDs can be blocked. Even when they switch off location, the company quickly sends alerts asking them to turn it back on. They feel they are being tracked 24 hours a day. Another issue is bundle booking. Customers book many services together, customers get discounts, but workers earn less money for more work. Also, if a worker disagrees with the customer, the worker is punished, not the customer. Even taking leave for personal reasons can lead to fewer job requests later. The next is the safety and dignity issues. The union leader here points out serious problems faced only by women. Some male customers pretend to be female to book services, and women work long hours even during their menstrual periods, and there are no toilet facilities during long shifts. Because of all these things, now the workers' unions have submitted complaints to the company and to the National Human Rights Commission, and many workers have switched off their apps in protest. The next article for the day, the Donroe Doctrine, a broken international order. See, this article is about how the global order is breaking down and how powerful countries are openly doing whatever they want without fear of rules or consequences. Now, what is the Donroe Doctrine? The old Monroe Doctrine has come back in a new and dangerous form. The Monroe Doctrine in 1823 said the US will control the Western Hemisphere and will not allow other powers to interfere there. Now, under President Donald Trump, this idea has become more aggressive. In early 2026, the US captured the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, took him to the US and jailed him. And this is a direct violation of another country's sovereignty. Now, the president has openly justified this by saying the US is the security boss of the Western Hemisphere. And this new forceful version is being called the Donroe Doctrine, that is Donald Trump plus Monroe Doctrine. Now, why is this dangerous? Normally, such an action should have caused global outrage, but protests were very weak. This shows something important. The post-World War II international order is collapsing. Rules, laws, sovereignty no longer respected, and it is becoming a might is right world. The fear is if the US can do this to Venezuela, China may do the same to Taiwan, Russia may do the same to its neighborhood. In short, powerful countries may start grabbing what they want. Now, what does US policy say? The US National Security Strategy 2025 clearly says the US wants to reassert dominance in the Western Hemisphere. It will block China and Russia from operating there. And there are also hints that similar actions could happen against Cuba, Colombia, Mexico, even Greenland for security reasons. And this is classic shock and awe, sudden, overwhelming use of force to scare others. See, the US document also criticizes Europe, saying Europe has become weak. It should take care of its own defense. The US may reduce its role. On Ukraine, if you take, the war is stuck there. Either it ends badly for both sides or it escalates and spreads in Europe. If you take West Asia, it is described as good in parts, bad in parts. See, Israel's major military campaign has passed, but real peace is far away. Gaza remains extremely sensitive. Now, Iran is facing internal protest, economic crisis, pressure from the US and Israel. And Iran itself says it is fighting economic war, psychological war, military war, and terrorism. The US and Israel may see this as a chance to weaken the Iranian regime permanently. See, if you take Afghanistan, it is becoming unstable again. Terror groups are gaining strength. In Pakistan, the military is becoming more powerful, democracy is weakening there. But at the same time, the US is supporting Pakistan again, giving weapons, treating it like a favored ally. And Bangladesh also remains politically unstable. If you take China's position, 2025, it handled US tariffs well, it strengthened its manufacturing capacity and also controlled global supply chains. And China used rare earth exports as a weapon against the US. And China is also growing stronger in Southeast Asia, expanding presence in the Indian Ocean, and it is also challenging US dominance. So the Pacific and the Indian Ocean are no longer US only zones. Now, what does all this mean for India? Now, India is in a difficult position. Trump criticizes India for buying Russian oil. US supports Pakistan again. India feels isolated in West Asia. If you take some positives, many groupings like I2U2, India, Middle East, Europe corridor. But overall, US pressure plus China's strength is equal to India squeezed from both the sides. And China has trade and tariff advantages, whereas India has little room on this aspect. So the final takeaway of this article is the old world order is breaking. Rules are being replaced by raw power. The US is using an updated shock and awe strategy, and 2026 will be unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous. For India, it will be a year of caution, not comfort. See, the next article for the day is the EV boom is accelerating a copper crunch. See, electric vehicles may be green, but they depend heavily on copper, and the world is running short of it. Now, why is copper so important for EVs? Copper is everywhere in an electric vehicle. It is used in batteries, motors, wiring, charging stations, power grids. In simple words, no copper, no electric vehicles. An EV needs around 4 to 5 times more copper than a normal petrol or diesel car. Now, what is the problem? EVs are growing very fast, but copper supply is not. Over the last 10 years, electric vehicle sales jumped from less than 1 million to about 20 million. And copper use for EVs jumped massively along with it. This shows one thing very clearly: as EVs grow, copper demand grows almost automatically. Why can't copper supply increase quickly then? Because mining copper is slow and difficult. The main reasons are copper mines were ignored for many years. There is underinvestment. Ore quality is getting worse, and opening a new mine takes 10 to 15 years, and environmental protests slow down the projects too. So even if demand rises today, supply cannot catch up quickly. Now, what is this copper crunch? Right now, supply and demand are still close, but soon demand will overtake supply. By 2026, shortage may begin. By 2028-2030, shortage could be massive. By 2030, the shortage could be equal to the output of the 10 biggest copper mines in the world combined, and that is huge. Now, what will happen if copper becomes scarce? Several problems like EVs will become more expensive, charging stations will be delayed, clean energy targets will slow down, electrification will depend on metal availability and not based on the ambitions. And if you take the China factor here, China is the biggest player. And China uses nearly 60% of the world's EV related copper, and it controls 70% of global battery production, and it has a tightly controlled supply chain, and this gives China pricing power, long-term supply control, strategic advantage over copper rich countries. Meanwhile, Europe and the US use much less, and India's copper demand for EVs is still very small. Now, why does this matter geopolitically? Because copper is becoming as important as oil was in the 20th century and semiconductors are today. And countries will compete for copper mines, long-term contracts, recycling technology. And energy security is now also metal security. So the final message of the article is EVs are not just a technological shift, they are a resource-heavy transition. And copper is the hidden backbone here. And without planning, copper shortage will slow everything. So what must be done? Increase copper mining responsibly, invest heavily in recycling, innovate to reduce copper use. See, this data point is very interesting that to compete with China, India may need China. See, this article is about a big change in India's thinking about China, especially about Chinese investment. What's the issue? In 2020, after the Galwan Valley clash, India put strict restrictions on Chinese companies. These rules said Chinese firms cannot easily invest in India. They need government approval, they need security and political clearance. Chinese firms were also restricted from bidding for government contracts. Because of this, China lost contracts worth 700 to 750 billion dollars. Now in 2026, India is planning to remove or relax these curbs. Now, why were the curbs introduced? To simply put, it is majorly because of the security reasons. India did not want Chinese money influencing strategic sectors. The Galwan class changed the political mood, and this was done through something known as Press Note 3, which was released in April 2020. And it said any investment from a country sharing a land border with India needs government approval. This mainly targeted China. If you think that did China invest heavily in India earlier, the answer is actually no. Even before 2020, China's direct investment in India was less than 1% of total FDI. So the curbs did not stop a huge flow, they just added pressure. But there is a catch. How did China actually invest earlier then? China mostly invested indirectly through tax havens, through third countries, not directly in its own name. And after this Press Note 3, even this indirect route was blocked. This discouraged Chinese firms completely. Now, why is India changing its mind? Because global supply chains are changing. The US and Europe are reducing dependence on China and looking for China plus one alternative, and India wants to become that alternative. That is the key reality. So, you cannot replace China in supply chains without involving China. And now China controls components, intermediate goods, dominates manufacturing ecosystems. So in India's economic survey 23-24 openly said Chinese FDI can help India. It can increase India's exports. It can help India join global supply chains. For example, if you take smartphones, earlier China supplied 60% of US smartphone imports. Later, due to tariffs, Chinese share fell to 22%. India, Vietnam, Thailand gained the share. This shows India can replace China in some products, but doing this in many sectors without Chinese firm is very hard. So the article takes a very pragmatic argument. It says that India wants to compete with China, but to do that, India may need Chinese capital, technology, and firms, especially if India wants to integrate into global supply chains. So the uncomfortable truth here is to reduce dependence on China globally, India may first need China locally. See the next article for the day, the importance of Pax silica for India. First, what is Pax silica? Pax means peace and silica is a key material used in semiconductors, that is chips. So Pax silica basically means a global effort to build peaceful, secure and trusted supply chains for new technologies like semiconductors and artificial intelligence. The idea is no single country should control critical technologies. Supply chains should not be used as weapons. Technology should promote prosperity, not coercion. Now, why was Pax silica created? Because technology is now power. Today's global economy is driven by semiconductors, AI, critical minerals like rare earth elements, and these are used in chips, EVs, defense systems, smartphones, data centers. The problem is China controls a very large part of the rare earth supply chain. China has already restricted exports when it wanted political leverage, blocked supplies to the US, disrupted India's auto and electronic industries. So countries realized depending on one country for critical tech materials is dangerous. That is why the US called the first Pax Silica Summit in December 2025. Now, who are part of this Pax Silica? The members are countries that control key parts of technology or minerals, or mostly rich, high-income US allies. For example, US overall tech leadership, Japan and South Korea chip manufacturing, Australia lithium and rare earths, Netherlands chip making missions, Israel AI and defense tech, UK strong AI ecosystem, UAE and Qatar big investment funds. And India was not invited initially, but the US ambassador has now said India will soon be invited. Why is Pax Silica clearly aimed at China? Because China dominates rare earth processing, uses export control strategically, and does not consider the development needs of countries like India. During trade tensions, China stopped rare earth exports. India had to sign strict conditions to restart imports. So, Pax Silica is basically a counter to China's control over critical technology supply chains. Now, why does India want to join? See, India brings three big strengths here. The first is the strong digital infrastructure like Aadhaar, UPI, public digital platforms. Second is fast growing AI market. Many companies adopting AI, increasing number of AI startups. Third, large talent pool. Thousands of Indian students trained in the US. Many may return to India due to visa restrictions. So India has also launched semiconductor mission, launched AI mission, attracted investments from Tata's, Micron and Israeli firms. So and it is also working with Japan and Singapore on chip supply chains. So India may not be strong yet, but it is building fast. However, India faces three big challenges. Number one, India is a developing country. All PAC Silica members so far are rich, high income, technologically advanced. Now, India would be the first developing country, the first non US ally to join here. And this could create expectation problems. The second, strategic autonomy. India does not want its foreign policy decisions to be dictated. Its autonomy here is diluted. And India's positions may align broadly with the US but differ in tone and timing. The third problem is protecting Indian industry. India will want to give subsidies to Indian firms, prefer Indian companies in government procurement, and control imports carefully. But some Pax Silica countries, especially the US, may not like this. So, India will have to negotiate this very carefully. So, in the future, the world may have two major technology supply chains, the one China led, the other Pax Silica led. So, in short, Pax Silica is an opportunity for India, but also a test of India's strategic balance. The next article for the day, how reusability can lead to sustainable, cost-effective access to space. Earlier, space missions were run mainly by governments. Rockets were used once and thrown away, and space travel was very expensive. Now, private companies like SpaceX lead the industry. Rockets are being reused and space has become a commercial business. Because of this, the space industry may be worth over $1 trillion by 2030. Now, why are reusable rockets such a big deal? See, think of it like this. Old rockets were like single-use plastic bottles. Reusable rockets are like airplanes. If you throw away a rocket after one flight, costs are very high and launches are rare. If you reuse rockets, cost per launch falls very sharp and you can launch more often and space becomes accessible to more players. And this is the biggest shift in space travel. Now, why are human space missions more expensive? Sending humans to space cost 3 to 5 times more than sending satellites. Why? Because humans need life support, safety systems, backup systems, careful planning. Satellites don't need air, food, or rescue systems, so they are simpler and cheaper. Why is space travel so hard technically? The rocket faces two main problems. The one is gravity. Earth is pulling it down. The other is air resistance. The atmosphere slows it. A rocket cannot push against anything, so it moves forward by. Now, why do rockets carry so much fuel? Here's the key problem. Fuel itself is very heavy and you need fuel to lift fuel. This creates a vicious cycle. As a result, over 90% of a rocket's weight is fuel. Less than 4% is the actual satellite. And this is explained by something called the rocket equation. But the idea is simple. Weight is the enemy of space travel. To solve this weight problem, rockets are built in stages. Each stage burns fuel, then is discarded. This reduces dead weight during flight. Traditional rockets, including Indian ones like the PSLV, use stages once. Drop them into the ocean. This works, but it wastes expensive hardware. Now, what did SpaceX change then? SpaceX introduced several innovations like reusing rocket stages, making parts in-house, modular designs, 3D printing parts. The biggest change is reusing the first stage of the rocket. The Falcon 9 rocket lands back on Earth vertically, uses engines to slow down. And it also uses air resistant to lose the speed. And SpaceX has already recovered rocket stages 500 plus times and reused some stages more than 30 times. And now, where does India stand? Now, ISRO is working on reusability too. Two main ideas. The first is the reusable launch vehicle, like a small space shuttle. It lands on a runway. The second is recovering rocket stages, like SpaceX, landing on land or sea platforms. And technology testing is ongoing. Now, what should India do next? To stay competitive, reusability must be non-negotiable and the future rockets should have fewer stages, recover stages and be designed for reuse from day one. Because global space market is becoming very competitive and fully reusable rockets will soon be normal. See, regarding this article, SIR order was legislative, approach liberal, says election commission. We have seen multiple times, so I'm skipping this article. See this article, Supreme Court to examine query by Tamil Nadu, Kerala on whether ED is a juristic person. First, what is a juristic person? A juristic person is not a human being, but the law treats it like a person. Example, a company, a corporation, a university. Such entities can file cases, be sued, claim legal rights. They are different from natural persons like you and me. Now, what is a dispute? The states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu have asked the Supreme Court to decide, does the ED legally qualify as a juristic person? They say that the ED is only a statutory body and it is created by law and it has only the powers given in that law and it is not a body corporate. So it cannot claim independent legal rights or file writ petitions. Now, why did this issue come up? Because the ED filed a writ petition in the Kerala High Court under Article 226. Normally, citizens approach high courts under Article 226. Sometimes companies or corporations do too. But here, a central agency itself approached the court. And Kerala has objected this and said, you cannot do that and you are not, because you are not a legal person. Tamil Nadu says it has faced similar problems. It accused the ED of misusing the court process, filing writ petitions to force action. Now the court will decide whether the ED is a juristic person or only an arm of the government with limited powers. That is this case about. See this article. Activists urge Supreme Court to treat hate speech as a constitutional tort. First, you should understand what is a constitutional tort. Normally, if someone gives a hate speech, police see it as a law and order issue. They may or may not register a case. But a constitutional tort means the state can be held responsible, especially when its officers like police, administration fail to act and when fundamental rights are violated. So the argument is, if the state allows hate speech to happen or ignores it, the state itself should be accountable. Why do activists say hate speech is different? They say hate speech is not just about bad behavior. It targets specific communities. It is discriminatory by nature. It attacks the core values of the Constitution, which is equality, dignity, and fraternity. So they argue hate speech is not just about public order. It directly harms constitutional rights. See, regarding this article, serious about holding dog feeders liable, says Supreme Court. See, why did this clarification come up? Let me tell. Earlier, during a hearing, the judges made oral remarks suggesting that dog feeders could be made responsible for dog attacks and states could be asked to pay heavy compensation for dog bite cases and feeders should keep the dogs within their premises if they feed them. Now, the court said that those remarks that were given in the earlier hearing were serious and not sarcastic, and that is this article about. Ex-CAPF officials file contempt plea in Supreme Court over IPS deputation. See, this case is about a long-running conflict between CAPF officers and IPS officers and whether the government is following the Supreme Court order. And this is very important for public administration optional. First, who are CAPFs and IPS? CAPFs are forces like CRPF, BSF, CISF, ITBP, SSB, Assam Rifles. Their officers are career officers within these forces. Now, IPS officers belong to a different service. They are often sent on deputation to CAPFs. They occupy senior posts like Inspector General. Now, CAPF officers have long complained that IPS deputation blocks their promotions and leadership roles. Now, what did the Supreme Court say in 2025? In last year, that is May 2025, the Supreme Court gave a major ruling. It said CAPF Group A officers or organized Group A services, meaning they are full-fledged recognized services like IAS, IPS. The government must gradually reduce IPS deputation in CAPFs, especially for senior ranks up to Inspector General, and do this over 2 years. The government must review the cadre structure and service rules and complete this review within the 6 months. And this judgment is very important for CAPF officers. Did the government accept this ruling? Initially, the Union Home Ministry challenged the judgment. It filed a review petition. But in October 2025, the Supreme Court rejected the review petition. And this made the May 2025 ruling final and binding. So what is the problem now? The retired CAPF officers say the government is not actually implementing the Supreme Court's order because IPS deputation has not been meaningfully reduced. Cadre and service rules have not been revised properly and the 6-month timeline has already passed. See, this case matters because it affects the leadership of India's armed police forces, morale of CAPF officers, and the authority of Supreme Court judgments. See, regarding this article, DGCA directs airline operators to appoint a Chief of Flight Safety. Just know this. Chief of Flight Safety has to be appointed by the airline operators, nothing much. See, in this article, gunmen abduct over 150 Christian worshippers in Nigeria. Please look this in the map and look also into the Kano. That is the place in Nigeria. Look into that. The next one is Israel pulls down headquarters of UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Please look into this also. It is in East Jerusalem. Look into this place in news. The next article for the day is Trump slams UK's move to hand over Chagos Islands. First, what are the Chagos Islands and why do they matter? The Chagos Islands are controlled by the United Kingdom. One island there, Diego Garcia, hosts a major US military base. And this base is crucial for US naval operations, long range bombers, and strategic control of the Indian Ocean. So, even though the islands are small, they are strategically very important. Now, what did the UK decide to do? In May 2025, the UK signed an agreement with Mauritius. Under this deal, sovereignty of the Chagos Island will go to Mauritius. But the UK and US will lease Diego Garcia back for at least 99 years. So the US military base will continue to operate. At that time, that is during this May 2025, the US government supported the deal. It said the agreement protects long-term security of the base. Now, why did the UK agree to this? Because the first reason is the United Nations, and the second is the International Court of Justice. They have been telling the UK for years that the Chagos Islands legally belong to Mauritius. So for this year's UPSC Civil Services Prelims, this is very, very important. Please look into the Chagos Islands map. See, it is a group of islands. Chagos archipelago means it is a group of islands. You have to look into this. It is in Indian Ocean first thing. Then also look into the north to south order of the islands. See, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Chagos, Seychelles is there, and below the Chagos archipelago only you'll be seeing the Mauritius and Madagascar. With threats to take over Greenland, Trump turns NATO against NATO. First, what is Greenland and why is it important? Greenland is a large Arctic island. It is autonomous but officially part of Denmark, and Denmark is a founding member of NATO. And Greenland is important because it sits between North America and the Arctic, and it is crucial for missile early warning systems, and it helps monitor ships and submarines, and it also has rare earth minerals which are strategically valuable. The US already has a military base there which is known as Pituffik, with American troops stationed there permanently. So this year Greenland is very important for prelims in places in news. Look into that. So if you take Greenland, there is a Baffin Bay, then there is Davis Strait, then Denmark Strait. There is also a Greenland Sea. So look into this very carefully, study this, keep on looking into these kind of maps again and again. Only then these places will be registered in your memory. So do this often. See, and you must also know this, the plan of buying Greenland is not something new. Already, US has purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867. See, there are some static knowledge given in this area. You can study about this 1951 Defense of Greenland Agreement and what does the Article 5 of NATO says, and the purchase of Alaska, and finally the GI-UK gap. It is a naval choke point in the northern Atlantic Ocean between Greenland, Iceland and the United Kingdom. See the next article, why only female Darwin's bark spiders weave the toughest webs. There is a spider called the Darwin's bark spider and it is found in Madagascar. And what makes it famous is its silk. This silk is stronger than steel and it is about 3 times stronger than iron. And scientists say it is the toughest biological material ever tested. And all this is made by a spider that is only about 2 inches long. But here's the surprising part. Not all Darwin's bark spiders makes this super strong silk and only large adult females do. And males and young spiders do not do this. Now why only adult females? Because female spiders are much bigger than males. As females grow, they start building huge webs. And some webs are up to 25 meters wide and these webs are often built over rivers and lakes. And to hold such massive webs, they need exceptionally strong silk. So the spider's body switches on the high performance silk mode only when required. And males don't do this. See the last article for the day, which is the photo shot. See, here the scientists are examining the Pompen moss in a pristine peat. Now we will look into what is this peat or what exactly are peatlands mean. Peatlands are places like marshes, bogs, fens or swamps. They stay waterlogged most of the time. And because there is very little oxygen in wet soil, dead plants don't rot completely. They slowly turn into peat, a dark spongy soil. Now, why are peatlands very important? Even though they cover only about 3% of the Earth's land, they store more carbon than all the world's forests combined. And they act like natural carbon banks. And they also help slow the climate change. The peatlands can also hold large amounts of water, reduce floods, keep rivers flowing during dry periods, and they also support unique plants and animals. So that's all for today. Thank you all for joining.